You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 557, Dragon's Teeth.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we thaw out an episode of Star Trek and examine it head-on, picking it apart for the morals, meanings, and messages, and asking ourselves if it stands the test of time for now or 900 years from now.
This week, Dragon's Teeth, the one where 7 of 9 rekindles an old war by going rogue and waking an alien out of a stasis tube. This would have been a whole lot shorter if she had just kept walking. Norman, welcome back. I'm so glad that you and I get to cover this one together. How's it going?
It's actually going really well. I remember when you contacted me about this particular episode, you said Dragon's Teeth, and I said, I wonder if this is the Space 1999 equivalent of Dragon's Domain, because I am definitely going to do that.
Yes, I had that in my head. I was like, ooh, do we get a rubber monster in here? Well, not quite.
Well,
yeah.
Not quite, no.
No. Well, anyway, we get to learn all about Dragon's Teeth and what they are and what they do in this episode. But in the meantime, why don't you tell folks how to contact us?
Well, we would love to hear from you. So Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. While you're at it, one of the most important ways to help the podcasts you love is to leave a 5-star rating and review at Apple or your favorite podcast platform. And always remember your comments could be used on this show and the Roddenberry Podcast Network. Machine will not be denied. I was asked to make sure that this part of the credits sequence was...
Okay. Yeah. You got it.
Okay.
Well done.
And now here's John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, let's talk about Dragon's Teeth. Well, we have a story by Michael Taylor. Now, the most recent of Michael's episodes that we discussed was Warhead, but it should not surprise you at all that he name-checks the Devore in this one, since he also wrote Counterpoint. Now, for Dragon's Teeth, Michael shares the teleplay credit with Brannon Braga and Joe Menosky, and a funny thing happened on the way to the final script. The story was originally conceived as a two-parter. But as Brandon and Joe got to work, they just didn't think it was working, and they settled on a single episode format. However, as that script was nearing completion, they realized that they actually had enough material to make it a two-parter. They really wanted to do that, but it was too late in the production cycle to change course again. So that's how we end up with the single story that we get here. Now, it was directed by Rick Colby. Now, Rick has had a long tenure as a Voyager director, and of course, his time with the franchise stretches back to TNG's second season, then on to DS9, and we're getting toward the end of his Voyager run. He has just 3 more episodes in the series, and then he'll jump over to Enterprise for one entry there. Now, we've got some great visuals work here, and while Voyager is confident with the CG work at this point, it's nice to see some traditional matte painting done here by Dan Curry, blended a bit with the CG. So several nice effects going on in this. And while all of that is very impressive, that's not what excited the Television Academy, because this episode was nominated for Best Hairstyling. I know. Strange. All right, let's meet our guest stars. The ill-fated Jisa was played by Mimi Craven. In the 80s and 90s, Mimi was making a lot of TV and film appearances. She guest starred on The Twilight Zone and Beauty and the Beast, and you could also find her in genre features like the original Nightmare on Elm Street, and her feature film debut was in 1982's Swamp Thing. Mimi is essentially retired from acting, though she did show up in a short film in 2021. And you may be asking yourself about her last name. Yes, Mimi was married to Wes Craven from 1982 to 1987. Bob Stillman plays the Touré captain, and while Bob doesn't have an extensive resume, he has had guest roles on The Good Wife and Law & Order, and around the same time as his Voyager appearance, he was actually recurring in a Nickelodeon children's show called Allegra's Window. Ron Fassler plays one of the Vadoir we meet, Morin, and Ron got his start on Broadway and then made the move over to TV and film in the early 80s. He may be familiar to sci-fi fans as a long-running character, Captain Grazer, in the Alien Nation franchise. He has numerous feature film credits, and you may not have recognized him when he played Ted Koppel in the 2009 film Watchmen. Gaul, one of the more hawkish of the Vadoir, is played by Robert Knepper. Now, you would be forgiven if you didn't recognize him in the alien prosthetics here, but we did actually see Robert before on Star Trek. He appeared in his human guise as Wyatt, Deanna's betrothed, in the TNG first season episode Haven. And finally, Gedrin is played by Jeff Allen. And we also need to go back to TNG for Jeff's first Trek appearance. He was Ensign Sutter in the 5th season episode Imaginary Friend. But his Trek credits do not end with those 2 TV appearances. Oh, no. Jeff also appeared as Lieutenant Furlong in the 1996 CD-ROM game Star Trek The Borg, which, if you're keeping track at home, I still cannot play.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Remember to try the fresh, perfectly preserved villains. They're in your grocer's freezer section.
Prologue. On an unknown planet, deep within a series of underground caverns, Jisa and Gedrin frantically race to their stasis pods as debris rains down upon them. With only moments to spare, Gedrin secures Jisa in her pod. She wonders if she will dream, while Gedrin comforts her, promising they will start again once they emerge from stasis in 5 years. Act 1. Voyager is pulled into a subspace corridor filled with debris and encounters a Touré vessel that helps free them. However, the Touré captain demands Voyager erase all evidence of their underspace, a corridor Tom confirms allowed them to travel over 200 light-years in 5 minutes. When Janeway requests access to the underspace, the Touré refuse and threaten to board Voyager. As they escape, 7 of 9 identifies a radioactive planet as a hiding spot. Voyager descends into the atmosphere, forcing the Touré to retreat due to the radiation. The crew suddenly discovers a devastated cityscape, with Harry Kim determining its destruction occurred almost 900 years ago. After landing, Tuvok warns Janeway that the surface radiation won't shield them from Touré's sensors for long. While repairs commence, Harry detects faint life signs beneath the city. Janeway, Tuvok, and Seven explore the underground tritonium-reinforced caves and find several functioning life pods. Seven activates one, reviving a man who learns he has been in stasis for almost 900 years. He asks about his wife Jisa, only to see for himself that she didn't survive. Act 2. The doctor's patient awakens in sickbay and is soon greeted by Janeway and Seven. Recognizing Seven as Borg, he recalls past encounters and reveals his species, the Vadoir, who once controlled the underspace corridors now dominated by the Touré. Sometime later in the mess hall, Gedrin informs Janeway that thousands of his Vadoir stasis pods in preserved vehicles remain underground. He laments his wife Jisa's lack of courage before stasis, prompting Janeway to see Gedrin as somewhat heartless. When Neelix offers him refreshments, Gedrin identifies him as Talax Elise, the ancient name for Talaxians. In response, Neelix explains that in his language, Vadoir means foolish. But before he can apologize, a plasma charge hits the city, triggering a red alert. On the bridge, Chakotay informs Janeway that the Touré are closing in. Gedrin suggests connecting Voyager sensors to a Vadoir sentry satellite. Using it, Voyager targets and disables the lead Touré ship, stopping their attack for now. Janeway then strikes a deal. Voyager will help the Vaadwaur in exchange for access to their subspace corridor network. After agreeing, Gedren leads Janeway and Chakotay into deeper underground tunnels, revealing a massive chamber of Vaadwaur fighters. Chakotay likens it to the Greek myth of dragon's teeth, where warriors rise from the ground when the teeth are sown. Act 3. After reviving several Vaadwaur from stasis, including Gall and Morin, they and Janeway collaborate to honor their alliance by helping the Vaadwaur rebuild their civilization, reclaim their subspace corridors, and escape the Turay orbital siege. Morin works with B'Elanna to reanimate the remaining Vaadwaur. Meanwhile, in her quarters, Naomi Wildman plays with a doll as Neelix arrives to tuck her in. When he asks about the Vaadwaur children, she admits she dislikes them because they mocked him. Neelix, unbothered, doesn't press her further. In the underground chamber, B'Elanna assists Morin with repairs. He's quite enamored with her Klingon heritage and remarks, "As children, we are all taught to fall asleep imagining a different way to die." Later in the mess hall, Neelix grows curious and investigates certain ancient Talaxian references to Vaadwaur. The computer compiles a troubling list of specific folktales, prompting Neelix to study them further in his quarters. In Astrometrics, Seven and Gedren discuss relocation planets, with Seven feeling obligated to help the Vaadwaur find a new home. Meanwhile, Tuvok reports more incoming Turay ships and proposes a defense. Voyager will attack head-on, while Vaadwaur fighters launch a surprise strike. Gall requests Voyager's photon torpedoes to arm their fighters, but Janeway denies the request, citing Starfleet protocols. Later, in the underground chamber, an angry Gall conspires with Gedren and Morin to seize control of Voyager, intending to use its technology to achieve their goals. When Gedren protests, Gall threatens to return him to stasis if he refuses to comply. Act 4. As Seven shows Gedren a potential planet for relocation, she admits that her motive is to actually reconstruct a civilization instead of helping assimilate one. Suddenly, Neelix summons Seven to Cargo Bay 2 to share his findings on the Vaadwaur, a race that appeared, destroyed everything in its path, then vanished, most likely through the Vaadwaur subspace corridor network. Neelix convinces Seven to cross-reference his findings through her Borg database. Later, Janeway confronts Gedren in her ready room after Neelix and Seven share their findings. Acknowledging his deception, Gedren admits that the Vaadwaur used the corridors to expand their territory, but insists they weren't purely aggressive. This forces Janeway to adopt a more defensive stance, altering her agreements with the Vaadwaur and adjusting their strategy against the Turay. Gall is now limited to deploying only 10 Vaadwaur escort fighters to cover Voyager's escape, as Janeway fears more firepower on Gall's side could pose a threat to Voyager herself. As Voyager prepares for ascent, Tom's sensors detect massive energy readings from the underground chamber. 17 Vaadwaur fighters are launching on a direct attack vector toward Voyager. Act 5. Voyager continues her escape, but Gall's attack fighters relentlessly pursue. The ship's defenses hold, but she suffers heavy damage. Realizing they're headed from the Vaadwaur's proverbial frying pan into the Turay's literal fire, Janeway orders Harry to contact the Turay captain. Believing her report about the Vaadwaur, the captain sides with Voyager against their old enemy. Gedren helps by offering to boost the satellite signal from the surface. Janeway agrees and sends Tuvok with him underground. They must act quickly, as Voyager's survival is now in the hands of the Turay's ability to destroy Gall's forces. After infiltrating the tunnels, Gedren successfully uplinks the signal, but the chamber collapses. He urges Tuvok to escape while he stays behind to maintain the connection. Janeway devises a plan to boost Voyager's power by absorbing particles from the radiogenic atmosphere, restoring impulse power. After clearing the thermosphere, Voyager goes to warp and escapes, leaving the rekindled battle between the old enemies behind. Later in Janeway's ready room, Seven expresses guilt over her role in the Vaadwaur resurgence, but Janeway reassures her that, despite the mistake, she might have made the same choice. The end.
Nice job, Norman. And I gotta say, I love, this just always feels like a Brandon Braga thing, where you have the short teaser segment and you just start it with a bang. You get just enough dialogue out to express what's going on. And there's some great effects here that really, I think, sets up what we're about, like the kind of story we're about to get into.
I like the opening. I liked being in the caves, and I like kind of like the setup. The one thing, though, that kind of takes me out, and this is not just Star Trek's fault, but it's a fault of like kind of 90s production, is like those, kind of like that triagonal or a very kind of like angular scaffolding that looked like support props. That's kind of like how I used to hang my antenna from my dad's house, you know, like one of those things.
Yeah,
right. So it was a little bit. And,
a little earthbound, you know. Also, the biopods look pretty familiar. I think that we've seen those props around in Voyager as well. And did you notice that scene where Gedron's standing there talking to Jisa, and he's got his hand on the biobed, and like a rock just drops right next to his hand. I love all the stuff. I love all the debris falling around, but I just keep picturing, you know, whatever prop guy is sitting right off camera, probably hanging off of a piece of scaffolding himself, and just like, okay, time to, you know, cue the rock. Boom.
You're probably taking bets up in the scaffolding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I like the reuse, the reskinning of these stasis pods, and you know, as memory serves, it's going to be Resolutions, the Thaw, the one with Fear, and
Michael McKean,
the one where Tom keeps escaping from the stasis pods. These were those same pods, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah. I like when Jisa, you know, again, you need these moments to drive home the reality of the situation. Do you think we'll dream? And I love that conceit. It unfortunately took me on a whole other path of thought, just like, well, if you're cryogenically or otherwise preserved, wouldn't that have to slow down the brain activity because your brain uses energy, so you need to slow that down? Would you slow it down enough so that it couldn't dream? And then I just thought, that's not what the episode is about. Move on.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, yeah.
In a cold open, when someone says a line specifically like 5 years from now, you know that that's not going to happen.
That will
not in a cold open.
Yeah, 5 years, right? Like wink to the audience, right?
I love the subspace colon effect.
Yeah, pretty good.
Because that's kind of like
pretty good.
It felt like of those like old graphics of like food particles going through the intestines.
Yeah. Oh my God, it did exactly
that's
like that.
What it reminded me of. All right, so I know the conceit of being on, like, specifically a Star Trek episodes that all of the aliens speak English. But if they're speaking English all the time, then why do they make, like, a point to say something like underspace to, like, make it sound more alien?
Right. It's when they just say subspace.
Yeah, because I'm sure
because our translator would pick that up and go like a reference to underspace means subspace.
Right. So that's kind of like we all know that the universal translator is translating like, you know, 1 billion miles a minute. So I don't know. It's just kind of like it rubs me the wrong way when the conceit like that has to have another conceit.
I love the shot of Voyager landing in what can only be considered New Chicago. I mean, yeah, of course. And if you get that reference, you get me.
I think that in 1999, all those effects, they all probably worked together a lot more than, say, looking at it from today's standpoint, because it does look like a video game. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It just feels like one of the old style Star Trek Voyager role-playing game video games.
Oh, yeah. There's good and bad to be taken there. Like, it's very ambitious, but then I kept thinking, well, there's a lot of things. Like, when you see Voyager on the planet, I felt like the lighting was a little weird because Voyager is very kind of bright gray, and everything else around it is this orange, hazy stuff. I'm like, well, we should be seeing that on Voyager 2. And I also felt like the scale was a little off because, and I know that they kept trying to figure this out on a production, like, how big do we make Voyager? The buildings look too small, do they look too big? And I thought, well, it's like, it's straddling a street, but it looks huge. It just, those streets would be 1,000 feet wide. Like, that's
huge, like a hangar,
Yeah, like it doesn't make sense. Like park it in a football field or something.
Everyone remember where we parked, right?
Where we parked. Right. Now I know this becomes a thing in the episode, but 7, come on, ask permission next time. Really, don't go touching stuff. You should know better.
So the way I saw that scene, I'm glad you brought that up because it begs the question: one, So she has the knowledge of reading a 900-year-old console. And
Right.
two, she has the right to activate a 900-year-old console.
Yeah. So much going on there, and she knows. So like, she waits till everybody else is out of the room.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm going to push all the buttons. Oh yeah. And then when they wake Gedrin up, Janeway's first line, "We're not your enemy," she says as she's pointing a phaser at him. I mean,
You're never an enemy when you
try
have the
harder.
barrel of a gun pointed at somebody else. Right.
Yeah. And by the way, that classic science fiction trope, there's always one who doesn't make it out of stasis. Usually a woman, and there's something to be said about that. See also Planet of the Apes, see also Star Trek Space Seed, and many, many others. I did wonder, how did the Vaadwaur survive multiple encounters with the Borg? Like, what were the Borg like 900 years ago? Were they just not as fully developed? Were they not as capable at assimilation? It raises a lot of questions.
I also liked when Gedrin touches the Doctor ever so briefly when he says he's a hologram. And he's like, "You what? Are you?"
Yeah.
Like, I am.
Right.
I am. So
Right.
It's just a nice little bit
Yeah.
of character building there. Like there's some skepticism there. Like I wish they made Gedrin a little bit more kind of like discombobulated, because he comes out of stasis. Again, if you believed in theory of kind of like his brain activity slowing down and then having to come back to speed, in real time,
Right.
he'd still be a little discombobulated. Like Khan saying to Kirk, "How long?" And this guy was a superhuman, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
I did really like the matte composite of looking through the bombarded city through the galley windows.
Super
That was
cool.
really nice. I
Yeah.
thought that was well done.
Yeah, that was good looking. I thought the alien makeup on all the Vaadwaur was good. It was very interesting, and I thought it was kind of vaguely Cardassian inspired, with the wide neck pieces. The Vaadwaur look a little friendlier. They don't look quite as reptilian, obviously, and not as gray as the Cardassians. But it felt like, all right, Michael Westmore, you're really putting a lot of effort into this one.
So I'm bringing back a Hey Look segment of the game.
Oh, okay.
So
good,
Neelix
yeah.
says, "Hey look at all the wonderful foods I've prepared for you." Hey, look at Janeway and Gedrin walk away without taking a bite of any of it. Foolish
Right.
Vaadwaur
Yes.
indeed.
I'm very impressed with Gedrin that he remembers a 900-year-old password. That's good. Most people can't do that. And I do like how, all right, we have to have Chakotay not only explain the story, but he's got to work in the title. Love it when a title gets name-checked in an episode. So that was good.
So anyone can fight me on this. So Chakotay's
Okay.
dragon's teeth reference, I'm surprised that this isn't one of those my people's intensifies moments, right?
Yes.
Because I know
yes.
that he referenced it from ancient Greek mythology, but it really should have been a rubber tree people's moment.
My people have a legend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been perfect.
It would have been amazing. Somebody could have. I thought that was Greek.
Nope.
No, it's
Rubber tree
definitely
people.
Rubber tree people. Yeah.
I have a question, though.
Okay.
How many Vaadwaur committed all of the underspace corridor maps to memory? Is it just a few of them, like Gall and Morin and Gedrin, or is it like all of them?
Oh,
Right? Because
that's a good.
if they don't all
question.
survive, do all of them have
Yeah.
redundancies to protect these space corridors?
That's interesting. Or I wonder if maybe the leaders know them all, but then lower levels maybe only know a few.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. But that was also, another interesting conceit. It's like they're too precious, so we don't even write them down, which is, again, how you remember a password.
Oh, that's right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Hey, Naomi Wildman's back. Love seeing her. Again, where is her mother?
All right.
just Neelix is walking in like, yeah, I belong here too, just hanging out and dispensing with the wisdom. Okay, all right.
I like the scene though between Naomi and Neelix. I thought it was well earned, and it kind of sets up the whole premise of what are they talking about? They're talking about us being foolish. Well, no, they were being foolish, and in our mythology, they're foolish. So sets up the subsequent scene of him being in the mess hall and then going through the computer records to figure it out. I thought that was neat.
All of that was super well tied in. I thought that worked well. Good moment of Morin trying to find common ground with B'Elanna, and she's just really not connected to it at all. I thought that was good because this, finally, it's a small moment, but it shows some of that growth since Barge of the Dead. And I asked myself, okay, is B'Elanna, is she just more comfortable with herself now where somebody's talking Klingon stuff? She's like, yeah, that's really not for me.
Are you saying that he had more in common with her?
Well
Thank
done.
you.
Golf clap.
Right.
You get a golf clap. Well done.
You may want to hold off on that because of what I'm going to say next. B'Elanna's perm, is this the most permy of her perms so far?
It is
Yeah.
permultimate. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
Bravo. Bravo, sir. Well done. +1 to you.
Yeah, thank you. And, I mentioned the trivia, but I love that we get a reference to the Devore. I really enjoyed Counterpoint, and it's nice to see these connected in that way. And again, just an interesting glimpse into how the Borg have been busy for 900 years, because of course they have been. That's what they do. And then I kind of thought, okay, now here's the moment, the turn that we've been waiting for, that they're going to go after Voyager if they don't get what they want. Raise the stakes, raise the drama. That's the kind of moment where I could see them thinking like, what if this was a two-parter? How far do they get?
And that would actually be the right place to end the two-parter, would be like in that moment, you know.
Yep.
Really nice
100%.
bit of directing there. Really nice angle from Rick. Just kind of like that bird's eye view. You're a fly on the wall.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the three of them conspiring, Gedrin, Gall, and Morin. Yeah, say it isn't so that Janeway just got betrayed again by a species she just met and, became friends with.
She picked the wrong ones to align with? Come on.
Yep.
Yeah. Really good moment, 7 of 9. I mean, this is kind of redundant in our reviews of Discovery, that 7 of 9 has great moments, and they are played perfectly. But I love this. 7 explaining her transition from assimilating civilizations to helping grow one. It's such a concise moment, but it really says so much about her own journey in the show.
Again, great scene, great writing, great performance. I mean, it's just kind of textbook. I hate saying that about what we see from Jerry all the time, but it's always good, always, dependable as a performance goes.
And I love raising the question, well, has Voyager considered settling down somewhere? Well, there was this planet with Amelia Earhart. that one was looking pretty good, but no.
My 37s intensifies. Yeah.
Right. I love the conversation between Neelix and 7 about many fables have a basis in reality. I thought that was a nice lead-in to kind of the layers of reveal that we get here. And Gedrin talking about his people's tendency to attack or dominate, and he says, well, that was 900 years ago. Yeah, for Voyager. But for him, it's yesterday.
Right.
so sorry. That's, the other way to remember a password is maybe he said it yesterday. But I'm sorry, that argument just doesn't hold. By the way, super well shot scene. I love these moments we keep getting in Voyager, this quiet intimacy. No music, no sound effect, just them standing there in the ready room. And I love how you see Janeway, she's on a step higher than him, and you have this separation with one of the light fixtures in between. It's just great.
Just to kind of expand on that particular scene. So the question I have about the 900 years, distance between when he was a active Vardwar to now, what he said is not a denial. Right?
Yeah.
And number 2,
That's true.
It's there a statute of limitations on atrocities.
Ooh. But, I mean, again, for him, it's yesterday, but for Voyager, it's 900 years. We don't have a punishment to fit your crime because it was 900 years ago for us. Yeah, good point. Come on, Janeway. She's saying this. By the way, everything's within earshot on the bridge, but Janeway's saying, I could really use a betazoid right now to tell me what's going on. Come on. Do you really?
Yeah. Do we ever really need a betazoid to let us know what's going on?
Not really. Pretty apparent. Love the effects, ramping up the action, ramping up the sci-fi shoot 'em up aspect of this. Voyager ascending through the atmosphere, just taking out a bunch of Vadwar ships. It's all good, just visceral stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they really spent a lot of time. I think probably the blocking and all of the storyboarding of Voyager's takeoff, her ascent, her being chased through all kind of like the superstructures and having all the Vadwar ships just kind of like, like flies and mosquitoes around him attacking. Really well done. You can tell that's where the money went in this episode, for sure.
Yeah. And then I love the coda here, the ending, Janeway, like, I doubt we've seen the last of them. Hey, really? Will we ever see the Vadwar or the Teray again? Because I'm not holding my breath.
Attention, all science fiction characters ever. Please carefully read the terms and conditions and end-user license agreement before you thaw out someone from another century and make it everyone else's problem. Thank you.
All right, I brought it up a moment ago in the last segment, but Seven made another judgment error. And although I like that we got to discuss it at the end, and that Janeway agrees that, yeah, look, you probably have a right to be compassionate. That's good. But she didn't think things through or even consult with anyone else. And again, I would maintain that she knew that she was doing something at least slightly wrong because she did it when nobody else was in the room. But I gotta ask, is it enough that then we just sort of end it like that? One little scene with Janeway, yeah, you did the wrong thing. And does that change Seven's status in the crew or her proximity to the captain or anything? No, it's just we acknowledge you did something wrong. And by the way, now it'll probably be much worse in this part of the galaxy because so many Vadwar ships escaped and they're in the underspace corridors, and now they will go terrorize other planets. So, right. Or they will just keep fighting the Teray, and things will escalate. So I don't know. I know that's sort of beating a familiar drum for as many times as Data endangered the Enterprise. Here's Seven endangering Voyager and also creating an interplanetary incident, multiple interplanetary incidents potentially, and changes because yeah, boy, that was wrong. Okay, see ya.
Yeah, I think the strange thing about that happening so early on in the episode and almost kind of so nonchalantly is that you really don't see Seven wrestle with her decision for any reason, and there wasn't even really kind of like a setup where Janeway would say, we are here strictly as observers to see what happened to this race that has been, decimated or, since 900 years ago, however you want to phrase it. And maybe even Tuvok saying, don't touch anything. We don't know if there are booby traps or, we don't know if this thing is going to blow up in our faces. And then she just kind of I don't know. It's like Seven lost a lot of common sense.
Yeah.
From everything that she has learned, from her experiences with Voyager so far in terms of Starfleet protocol, which buttons not to push, whose permissions that she needs to, get before it just, for so many great moments that have been directed in this episode, I felt that Rick kind of lost a little bit of the intent of that scene.
Yeah.
Or of that series of scenes to make Seven look a little bit more, I don't know, guilty for making that decision.
Maybe that's the kind of thing that we would have gotten in a two-parter, is you actually have to weave throughout Seven confronting the consequences of her actions. Now obviously she couldn't have known that it would get that bad, but it's okay, there are protocols to follow for a reason. And yeah, Janeway can say that she might have done the same thing, but things possibly could have unfolded differently. We don't really know. I think you need more moments of Seven actually grappling with it, and there's got to be a little more emotional reality to it.
So she does say to Seven, remind me to bring you up to speed on away mission team protocols or something to that effect.
She hasn't been?
That's what I mean. Like, so does that mean that she shouldn't be on the away team? That she, like we have argued before, that she hasn't been, given the proper Starfleet training to go on these missions, to not touch things you're not supposed to? And also, how does she know how to start the reanimation process of a technology that she doesn't seem to really know from 900 years ago?
Yeah. Well, look, first of all, I would assume that Seven had already downloaded all of Starfleet's protocols and probably knows them better than anybody else. And I'd also bet you that in the next episode, if there's an away mission of some sort, Seven will probably still be on it. Just because, Yeah. So, anyway, let's talk a little bit about Janeway here making her choice to align with one of these factions, and maybe that choice was to butcher Shakespeare thrust upon her. That maybe she didn't exactly have the ability to make an informed decision. But I do think that there's something interesting in her kind of weighing out where Gedrin is coming from. And Gedrin is the most complex of the Vaadwaur who we meet and we spend the most time with. But there's something about what he says that I think is, well, maybe not that hard to understand. Because, well, the Vaadwaur, like the tradition of all Star Trek aliens, they are us. We can say, well, we are people of science and compassion, and we explore, and that's what we do with these corridors, But by the way, given the circumstance, we're also power-hungry, territorial purveyors of war. It just depends on when you catch us and where our interest might be at that moment, Mm-hmm. So I like the idea that Gedrin here, as representative of the Vaadwaur, is presenting the scene where he basically says to Janeway, like, yeah, well, that's just a point of view,
Right.
So I'm not wrong by saying that I'm an explorer and I'm a scientist and we act out of compassion. But it's also not wrong to say that, yeah, we probably do things that are a violent expression of our interests.
Well, I mean, Manifest Destiny, Westward Expansion. I mean, take your pick here,
there
right?
We go.
And apply it into whichever generation or whichever decade or century that applies to the human experiment. So I think the big issue is at least with this episode, and maybe again, since it has been alluded that it should have been a two-parter, that we're not seeing the nuance of the Vaadwaur existence 900 years ago, and what they have done throughout the course of time, to the point where Neelix's Tlaxcalese ancestors even had mythological records for them, and it's kind of like, well, yeah, so is it like putting the Q on trial for what the Q has done throughout the course of their existence? I mean, you can take a look at a moral standpoint from a fixed position, but it doesn't necessarily make it true. Make it true for you morally at this point in time. But the Vaadwaur were doing what the Vaadwaur do, what life forms do. They expand, they evolve, right, like the Borg, and they take things over, because they need to expand their people, their power, their presence.
Yeah. And by doing so, they got themselves into a position where they got almost entirely wiped out by the Turay, who had enough. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's like there's the big fish that becomes the little fish that becomes the big fish again. It really depends on what bigger fish or what larger ocean or body of water that you start swimming in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the real kind of missed opportunity was in condensing so much of this story. It looks like there were really good ideas on the table about not just the Vaadwaur, but I'm sure the Turay were also involved in this, centuries long, conflict with whoever is going to control these subspace corridors. And it may not even be their technology. It could have just been something that they stumbled upon. You know what?
Yeah.
This is really good to expand our sphere of influence. And then all of a sudden, well, you know what? We're just as strong as them. And if we control these corridors, we become stronger than anyone else in our history. So does that make the Turay wash them or absolve them from any of the repercussions of their expansion.
Right.
I mean, what's inside those tunnels to begin with?
Well, a lot of trash right now, but yeah.
Destroyed enemies of the terrain as well. Right? So, yeah, it's like if you are dropped into out of context of history and you choose a side, either the Axis or Allies, and you don't know the context of that war, who do you side with?
Right.
And why?
Right.
Right.
Right. Well, and that's exactly is the situation that Janeway is faced with. And again, maybe she just kind of stumbles into it. And, she has this very charming conversation with Gedrin about him, the umbrella, which I guess the Universal Translator had the correct Vaadwaur word for umbrella. There is another word that I feel like gets kicked around a lot in this episode. That is adapt. Because Seven says something to Gedrin about you will adapt, and Janeway says something about adapting. And, that is a word that is in multiple contexts used here. And it's interesting that both the Vaadwaur and the Turay are seen as unchanging and unadaptable over a 900-year period that who knows how long this war had raged on before that point 892 years ago when they went into stasis. And the Turay are still, after that point, managing, defending, dominating these corridors, whatever. But they are still, even when they're woken up, they are still faced with this same thing. It's like, we have been at war, you wake us up, we will continue to be at war. And I did think it was interesting that, for Voyager, the best option at the end of the day is just good luck, guys. We don't trust that you're going to adapt to this new situation at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have a specific note here, and I hope you appreciate this. The way I saw this, it's a taste of Armageddon.
Okay, I'm so interested that you mentioned that episode because I may come back to it, but please go right ahead. Yeah.
So the way I saw it, like this episode could have been Voyager's version of A Taste of Armageddon because it has a lot of the similar structures and kind of like some of the setups. It just doesn't go as far as A Taste of Armageddon.
Right.
Because you have this, this war between the Vaadwaur and the Turay, right? And the Vaadwaur were pretty much taken out of the equation by basically being cornered into submission. And to the point where they were able to reclaim their power 5 years after, going into hibernation, but things changed, obviously, right? It just didn't explore these elements between the Vaadwaur and the Turay enough to feel like they have that kind of a connection the way, say, the Vendikar and the was it Eminar?
Eminar. Yeah.
The war that they had that just kept going on for centuries, right? They needed something to make these two races face the issue. Right. And Janeway was right at the middle of it, but she decided to thanks bye out of there. Right. And say, like, you know what? You guys figure it out for yourselves. You guys are at war way before that we got here. We just decided to start it again. And now we're out of here.
Yeah.
And I think that, okay, maybe that could have been half of the episode of a two-parter. And then her come back like, no, we need to negotiate the peace. That's what Starfleet's about. Right. Isn't that the principle of Starfleet? It's not a prime directive issue because these are warp-capable civilizations, obviously, because of the space corridors.
Yeah.
But it is an obligation for Starfleet to actually sue for peace the way that Kirk made Anon 7 sue for peace with Vendikar and Eminar. So,
well, but, there's plenty of times where Kirk backed out of it too, Private Little War, he's just like, yeah, we can't resolve this. This is going to escalate. See you later. Let that be your last battlefield. It's just like, you can come here and fight on our ship, and guess what? We're going to send you back home to keep fighting each other because there's no hope there. So I could see a version of this where Janeway sticks around to try to resolve this, but maybe it's just untenable. I don't want to think that there's no peaceful way out, but maybe that's the situation. And I also feel like, the Vaadwaur are just going to look. I think even with their 53 ships spread out all through the corridors, their days are numbered. They're not going to be able to, in such small numbers. How many would we say? Fewer than 1,000 of them, that they won't be able to survive.
But maybe that's where the opportunity was to negotiate. Maybe the Tau'ri just tipped the scales enough power-wise, in the course of 900 years to be able to build their forces up to actually fight the Vardoir or create an alliance or coalition of forces. Where have we heard that before against, in Star Trek vernacular? But that's the point. Like, the point is you can't just create this situation that didn't exist until you got there and leave before you resolve the situation. Especially since it is your rogue crewman who started it.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I have a little fun distraction for us when it comes to my Talaxian peoples intensifies. So I really enjoyed the Neelix arc in this episode. I like the whole Talaxilize ancient version of the Talaxians. I like the folklore. I like how he used the history of his peoples to identify the Vardoir. I really wish that was the origin of Dragon's Teeth and not Chakotay's reference to the ancient Greek mythology. I felt like it would have kind of legitimized, what Neelix was kind of striving for and legitimizing kind of like the Talaxian people, with this greater conflict that was going on.
That would have been cool. That's a missed opportunity. Yeah.
Did Dragon's Teeth really leave us with something to chew on? Let's see what Norman and John had to say.
Well, we have made it to the end of Dragon's Teeth, and it didn't take us 900 years to come to a resolution.
Not even 5 years.
It's 5 days. Or 5 years.
Very good.
So here we are at the end at Mission Log, and what we do here traditionally is we take a look at everything that we have discussed throughout the course of this deliberation of this episode and ask ourselves these two very specific questions. One, does the episode hold up in terms of does it hold up? Does it withstand the test of time? And then two, at the very end, we take all of our conclusions and see if we can answer what the message is in this episode. Does it have any morals or meanings or messages for us to discuss at the very end? And whether or not John and I actually are on the same page. Sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't. Sometimes we convince each other of our opinions and expand the greater dialogue. So here we are with Dragon's Teeth. Here's a little toothpick for you, John. So you can pick
right.
At the teeth in Dragon's Teeth.
You said something a moment ago about A Taste of Armageddon, and you said that this could have been Voyager's A Taste of Armageddon. And A Taste of Armageddon, think back to TOS, that is one of those quintessential Trek episodes. You look at TOS and you look at how it handled certain big ideas like war or racism or whatever, socially relevant issue is on the table. And Star Trek would just come along and go like, boom, here is a definitive statement that kind of covers the human experience, right? And this episode of Voyager, I feel like it is a quintessential Star Trek episode, but it also it falls a little short of being that. It falls a little short of being that Taste of Armageddon style show that it could have been. But here's what it's got going for it. That it is high concept. There are good effects and good production value. But at its heart, it really does have a story here. And it's got this story about the consequence of war and being stuck in that mindset. We'll get to more of that when we do our morals, meanings, messages. I think it is directed very well, and I think it's among the best of Rick Colby's work on the series. Just things move at a great pace, creative camera work, the action is intense. There's a lot of handheld that I like that really ramps up the action and the drama. I think the guest stars overall very good, even if they get eaten up in the makeup sometimes. In a word, this episode is toy. It works even if it falls just short of being one of the great Voyager episodes. And I feel like they had high hopes for this. You can kind of tell that it is ambitious, it is epic in many ways. So maybe if they could have gone back and done that second rewrite as a two-parter, maybe they could have really nailed what the message was going to be in this episode and really made it a transcendent, great Voyager episode that would stand up in the way that Taste of Armageddon does, something like that. So it holds up. It's very good. It maybe just falls short of that greatness level that one would hope for. What do you think, Norman?
Do we know if any of the ideas of this two-part script actually exist in any type of transcribed form? Because I'm wondering if filling in the blanks with that content, if it does exist, would at least help flesh out the quality of the story as it was intended.
That's a good question. And typically what we have in the archive are final shooting script and then maybe like a story draft, but not an in-between script like that. I would be very curious to see if something like that exists somewhere. Yeah.
The reason why I ask, because I've critiqued episodes for far less that I have felt held up. And I do think that Dragon's Teeth does hold up, but at the same time, it's one of those kind of episodes for me that is kind of like neither here nor there. I can't penalize it for being technically wrong on any real front because I think it tells the pacing, I think, is good enough. I think that you're right. I think that Rick Colby's work in this is really, really extraordinary. When you're paying attention to kind of like some of the really nice directions that are happening in this episode. But at the same time, though, it's a little vanilla. Yeah. Right? It's a little just, it doesn't go far enough with, I think, some of the really good ideas that it was kind of like plucking at. Right? So it's not extraordinary. It's just a little above ordinary. And I want it to be extraordinary because I think that the premise deserves that. Yeah. But like I said, they don't go far enough with 7. They don't really go far enough with the real moral issue at the middle and end of this episode. It just feels like around Act 4 to Act 5, whoever was the powers that be in charge of looking at the script, they just want to say, look, we need more action and close this episode on something that's really, really exciting with a little bit of a moral message at the end of it, as is Star Trek.
As you're saying this, and I'm thinking, it comes across as one of those episodes where you feel like, okay, Voyager shows up, creates a problem, has to solve the problem, at least well enough, and then get out, and then we never revisit it again. And what's missing here is that, like, extra layer of, no, we're actually doing a moral commentary. Because you could make the same argument about A Taste of Armageddon. The Enterprise shows up, there's a problem, we get involved, we got to solve the problem, and then get out and never speak of this again. But A Taste of Armageddon delivers with this heavy sort of contemplation about the nature of war.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what's really, truly missing to make this episode unique and really stand out and, again, withstand the test of time. It's the consequence that we're missing here. Right? Again, Janeway leaves 2 major alien races, as far as we're concerned, to fight and continue a war that's been dormant for 900 years. Right? So the Toray have taken over, and, the space colon is now their underworld. And and maybe for good purposes, maybe, the Vaadwaur are down there and no one decided to wake them up. They're like, maybe people are like, we heard by our spy network that in 5 years they're going to rebuild their empire, but they didn't. So maybe that part of space started flourishing again because the Vaadwaur were gone, like literally gone. No one exactly knew what happened. Why would we want to wake that sleeping dragon with the dragon's teeth? Right. Why would we want to do that? Right. And then Voyager comes and does that. And then they, again, as I said before, like the kids say, a K thanks bye out. Right. You guys figure it out because that's not our problem. That's your problem. And that's not Star Trek to me. You know, at least try and solve it. Maybe the ending was bittersweet. Maybe it's exactly not what it was supposed to be. Maybe it wasn't the Taste of Armageddon. Again, maybe it was more of like a private little war or something that didn't feel right at the end, but it made you chew on it. Yeah. right? It makes you chew on those moments, and you don't get that out of a scoop of vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
You need sprinkles. You need bananas. Right?
There
You
we
need hot
go.
fudge.
Yeah.
You need that. Right?
All of the above.
So,
yeah. All right. Well, let's explore some morals, meanings, messages, anything that we might have taken away from this. It's interesting. Well before we recorded this, got a message. Can't remember if it was in an email or maybe on our Discord. Somebody referencing Space Seed with this episode. And I get it. As far as a premise goes, okay, ship shows up, we find frozen people, we thaw them out. Guess what? They're going to try to take over our ship. Yeah, I totally get that. But I think thematically, there's no connection, as far as a premise goes. Yeah. But thematically, what I picked up on, and it's so funny because, again, you and I write our notes separately. We come together on our recording and then we see what the other one did. And the two episodes that I reference in my morals, meanings, messages, A Private Little War and A Taste of Armageddon. And part of that reason being that, okay, if we look at A Private Little War, I think in Mission Log, of course, in Mission Log, we came up with this message many, many times, which is, war is stupid, which we have explored as a Star Trek theme many, many times. And it's always interesting to me when, one of our ships shows up and the intention is that we put the audience in the position of, like you said, observing a conflict from the outside and going like, well, what side am I really on? Does any of this actually make sense? Which is then a test for you to look at the real world and say, wait a minute, does any of this make sense? Why am I so engaged in one side or the other? It is a great kind of intellectual exercise to say, if I can actually remove myself emotionally from this, why are we fighting each other anyway? And as you pointed out in our discussion, Voyager finds itself in, again, the position of Janeway can't helping herself to kind of choose a side here for the promise of one more shortcut back home. But to her credit says, like, yeah, I don't care. We'll take the long way if it means staying out of your conflict, and she's got to play a little 3D chess to then make sure that they...
That's chess in 3 dimensions, right?
Oh, yes, that is. Yeah, that is exactly
right,
what
chess
that
in 3
is,
dimensions. Okay.
There is an interesting question here posed with a character like Gedrin. Can a leopard change its spots? And perhaps not if it's a Vaadwaur leopard, unless your name is Gedrin. He's the one that we follow. He is the one who shows some moral backbone by the time we get to the end of the story here. And Gedrin, he really has his moment. And if I may reference yet another Star Trek TOS episode, even if Gedrin can't summon the future, he can change the present. And that is his test. That is his moment. And it's really nice to see, because it's a big deal for Gedrin. He's back to life with very few of his own people on a planet that is dead. His entire civilization will die, but he sees the principle of stopping the war. He sees the principle of not continuing this very bad thing that has defined their entire civilization for who knows how many years before the initial going into stasis. He wants to stop the cycle in its tracks. Now, some of them get away, some of them go into the corridor, and we don't know exactly what will happen then. But you know what? Gedrin decided not to be a barbarian, at least for today.
That was well said, John. And I know that I'm supposed to take away something more important than what I think is an album cover from your morals, musing message. Mm-hmm. But you did give me the album cover drop for today, and that is Vaadwaur Leopard.
Oh, so good. So good.
Right?
I'm a big fan of theirs. Yeah.
That's with 2 A's. Mm-hmm. Yeah, early into Act 1, I think it's really kind of like sets where I think the message for me was going. So 7 activates Gedrin's stasis pod, and Janeway asks her, what are you doing? And 7 says, I've activated the reanimation sequence. He may be able to provide us with answers. This is where I think the main thrust of the story was going. I really think that if they focused on more of 7's actions and consequences and anchored the episode through her, we would have seen probably more of what I think the episode was trying to get at. At the end of the episode, again, this is now the bookend of 7's arc, Seven says to Janeway, Captain, I believe I made an error in judgment. And Janeway says, oh. And then Seven says, by awakening Gedrin, I initiated a chain of events that nearly led to our destruction. I wanted to help revive a civilization, not start a war. And Janeway said, you thought you were acting out of compassion. I might have done the same thing, but that doesn't make it right, Seven. The repercussions of this could be catastrophic. Now, this is where I find my meaning for the episode. But I also disagree with how Janeway responds to Seven's decision, saying that, quote unquote, acting out of compassion doesn't make it right. I disagree with that. I take great exception to Janeway's response because I believe that acting out of compassion is always the right reason for a decision. That is, for me, iconically a Star Trek Gene Roddenberry message. And the writing that for that line for Janeway, for me, is a little tone deaf for a Starfleet captain.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe the outcome isn't exactly what was planned, but the act of compassion is what a better humanity is supposed to strive to be.
Yeah.
Right? That the decision-making process of what we believe Gene Roddenberry's future of humanity is supposed to evolve into doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to always get the right answers, but it means we're going to be able to ask the right questions, right? So all this being said, I believe that the moral meaning and message for this episode is no good deed goes unpunished. Okay, so there is there's a little bit of definition, online that says the phrase "no good deed goes unpunished" is a cynical expression that suggests that kind acts can have negative consequences for the person who does them. It conveys a pessimistic view that people who help others are often met with ingratitude or misfortune. Some people may react negatively to being helped for a number of reasons, including feeling uncomfortable with being helped, becoming hostile, being drawn into a sad or overwhelming situation, or some other event that is remotely related to the good deed and hurts you. This is this episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is literally almost every single stage, every single act of this episode. And these are the exact reactions of how the Vardoir would react to Seven if it weren't for Gedrin.
Yeah.
Gedrin was the anomaly, right? So Seven believes that her one act of compassion may have just brought her one step closer to becoming more human.
Yeah.
That's what humanity does.
Yeah.
Right? And I felt that Janeway's response, it doesn't really necessarily support Seven's independent thought in a way where she at least understands sometimes the right thing to do doesn't necessarily turn out the way that you want it. And it's never really the outcome that you expected. But that's what Picard said to Data. He said, you can do everything right and still lose.
Yeah.
That's life.
Yeah. It's interesting because we talked about that line earlier where Seven is talking to Gedrin and kind of, pouring our heart out a little bit, saying, I used to assimilate, but now I want to build a civilization up. Now I can choose to do something positive and constructive, and that gives me purpose. That is as you said, the compassionate thing to do. I wonder if this would have played differently if there was just a minor tweak where they discover Gedrin's stasis pod. Seven reaches her hand out and says, I think I can revive him. Janeway is there to say, wait. And they have a conversation about compassion. They have a conversation about, no, this is the right thing to do, because clearly he is sitting here for this very purpose, which is to be revived and with the opportunity to bring back a civilization. And at that point, you don't even need the final conversation, except to have really that Picard Data moment, which is, no, we did the right thing. But it doesn't always play out that way. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, One Small Step.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. If Tuvok was still in the dessert-making business, he might have been able to calm these people down with some snacks. Just saying. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.